Hello there, my name is Mauro Sicard from Bricks Agency, and today we're going to talk about what image file should you use and why. So this is a question we really get a lot from our clients and even a lot of people that follow our community resources. And I think it's a valid question. At the end, there's many different file types and it can be confusing to know if you should use JPG or PNG or WebP or all of those other formats. So we're going to explain the foundation of what are the difference between these and if you should actually move to one of those new formats, because it is very likely that you arrive to this video because nowadays there's a lot of tools that allow you to convert your images in JPG or PNG to WebP. And there's for example, this tool from Webflow. And also there are some other tools in WordPress as well, like Imagify, along some other popular tools in the web design community. And at the same time, if you take a look at some of the PageSpeed Insights reports from Google, they often say that you should convert your images to WebP or AVIF instead of using PNG or JPG. And in that sense, a lot of users are having that kind of confusion of if you actually need to move from that format to the new format or not. So that is a question we're going to answer in this video. And in order to answer it properly, we will explain what are all of these formats and what are the benefits of using each. So let's get started into that. Great. So number one, JPG is one of those formats that it's kind of the classics. It's from the early days. And really what JPG is designed for is for photography. So if we, for example, search for a landscape image, you will see that all of these images have millions of colors. And for these kind of images, JPG really shines because it can show a lot of different colors, like complex photographies like this. And the images won't be as heavy. So in this case, this is a great option for that. On the next one, we have PNG, which is actually great for two different things. The first one is that it is great for images with very little amount of colors. So for example, if we search for clip art icon, something like that, and we select something like this, there's really just a handful amount of colors in here. And for that, PNG is very, very good because the file size is going to be very light. And because of that, your website is going to load faster. At the same time, if you take a look and search for example, for a logo, I will search for Google logo, you will see that on PNG images, the background will be transparent. And that is technically called an alpha layer. So it's like a layer that allows you to show transparency of your image. And back in the days, this was not so, not so common. That was really a new and magical thing. So those are kind of the two things for PNG. So if you have graphics with 256 colors or less, and if you have transparency, it is definitely the format that you should be using. And next, we have one that is a little newer, and it is SVG. SVG it really stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. And it's a format that allows you to upload vectors into your website. So for example, if we take a look at the Bricks Agency website and we go and check out the logo from Bricks Agency, you will see that this logo is on SVG. You can actually see it right in here. Here it is, SVG. So if we make it bigger, you will see it just doesn't look quality. It just keeps looking great. And it will never be blurry. It will always look super sharp. And the best of that is that it will always be super light. So these files are actually super, super light, but it still look perfectly sharp on all resolutions. So SVGs are great, but definitely you cannot use vectors for everything because, for example, a photo like the one we're seeing previously, that cannot be a vector. Vectors need to be able to scale, and that in Foundation can't do that. So SVG is great for icons that can be vectors or logos or things like that, but it cannot be used for everything. And next we have WebP, which is one of those kind of new guys that are getting very popular. You I already saw that I mentioned there's some tools to convert everything to WebP. And that makes sense because one, WebP is a format created by Google, and Google are really trying to push that forward. They're trying to make it popular. And the truth is that indeed WebP is a more modern file format. You take a look at, for example, these three images. You can see that The one in GPG, it's almost 500 kilobytes. This one in PNG, it's like almost 1.5 megabytes. But this one is less than 100 kilobytes. And you like the quality, they seem to be kind of the same. And you can see that across many different examples. Here, for example, in this comparison, it explains that like this loads faster in general. It supports transparent background. It's good for photos. It's good for images. Like it is very good format indeed. So like will be kind of wondering, why should I just not use WebP and that's all? But I will be answering that question in a moment. Let's just finish one more. So finally is AVIF. This is also kind of getting popular. This is not as popular as WebP, but it's also a modern file format. It has all the same benefits from WebP, but it's even more compressed. So it uses a better compression algorithm that makes it even lighter. So in that sense, like it is definitely great. So the question then, sorry, this is kind of open. The question then goes on like, what should we be using? Should I be using WebP or GPG and PNG, like kind of the traditional way? And a lot of people will say, like, if you go into Twitter threads or things like that, they will just say, okay, like, just use WebP and that's all, that's the best. But the truth is that that is not a very thoughtful answer. What happens here is that, like, this doesn't only depends on what format is better. It also depends on what your user's browser support. And if we take a look at WebP in this very famous tool called Can I Use? And I will make it bigger so you can see it a little better. You can see that by default, WebP is available in almost 96% of all users with perfect support and around 1% with partial support, giving a number of almost 97%. So that means like around 3 people out of 100 browsing the internet are not able to see those images. So for example, if we check out Internet Explorer and we check out the version 11, you can see that that just doesn't work in there. So if someone browses your website from Internet Explorer, it doesn't work. And you're like, I think that makes sense. You're like, that's a super old browser. And like most web designers and developers hate it. And that makes sense. I hate it too. But if your website or your company actually gets a lot of traffic from this type of kind of older users, if we can call it some way, it is likely they are not going to browse your website. So for example, let's say that you are like a bank or like a financial institution that needs to be available for everyone. In that sense, if you are using WebP, there's chances that like that 3%, like it's people that are just not going to be available to use your website. Or even worse, maybe if you have one type of business that is actually visited by a lot of people that are maybe not so tech savvy and they have like older browsers, maybe that number for you is not 3%, but probably like 5 or 10%. Who knows? So instead of just going ahead and converting all of your images, it definitely makes sense to see what kind of users you have. And you can do that with tools like Google Analytics. Let me know if you want me to record another video on that, on how to actually go over that data. But you can see, for example, hey, let's say that you are like a super cutting edge tech startup and most of your users are like on the latest version of Chrome or even like Arc browser that I'm using right now. On that sense, for example, probably you should be confident on doing that. That's not a problem. But at the same time, if you have a more kind of older business, maybe some brick and mortar type of business that has a lot of kind of older age users, in that case, it will be wise from you to actually check that before like making that change. And if we like take a look at AVIF, like really it's kind of worse in this case because like this only supports completely like 86%. So like almost 15 people out of 100 are not going to be able to like to render images on AVIF. So in that case, I will definitely say that this is not ready for mass production. We will definitely wait a few more years. And like I agree, this format is better in pretty much all aspects, but it makes sense that like we just need to wait for that to have massive adoption. This is very important to take into account because we had seen in the past from our clients that they sometimes make the change without asking us, like just go ahead and do it. And we had seen some of their users not able to access their website. And we had seen that more like in kind of older type of businesses. And that had caused problems in the past. So that's why we typically advise of like checking that data before making the conversion, and always obviously back up the website properly. So in case something goes wrong in the conversion, you can just like go back with a click. So that will be kind of the answer. So if we need to kind of wrap this up, I will kind of say the following. If you have users with all browsers, you should just use GPG for photographies, PNG for graphics, and SVG for vectors. Always, it's important to remember that all of these files should be compressed on TinyPNG or similar tools. There's like many conversion tools. Personally, I think TinyPNG is one of the ones that have the best conversion algorithm, but you can use the one you prefer. And kind of the other conclusion is that if you have users with modern browsers, maybe you are like a cutting edge app that's almost used only by teenagers that have like the latest version of Safari on their iPhone, something like that. In that case, it makes sense to use WebP for photographies and graphics and SVG for vectors. And that way, you only have those two options. And that's pretty much it. Again, that's the answer. I know it's a little more complicated than just saying use one or the other, but that's because it really depends on your users. And again, we have seen cases of people ignoring this advice and having to go back later. So we definitely suggest you to doing that. And that will be pretty much it. If you would like to learn a little more about these formats, there's actually two interesting blog posts that I will leave in the description. One is this one that says AV and WebP are not always better than PNG and GPG. This is really like an older blog post that explains why these are better than the other ones and why there are some cases where that doesn't happen. You can just like read that so you can understand a little more how those formats work. And also this one, like this one is actually in Chinese. I don't speak the Chinese, but this shows a lot of examples of like these formats and how these compare. And it shows a lot of images in multiple formats and what is kind of the sizing. For example, you can see here or here, and like there's in general many good examples for you to understand like in what cases one kind of wins versus the other. This is not needed at all, like just in case you want to go more in detail and a little more tech savvy. And I will say that is pretty much it. I hope this video was useful for you. If you have questions or need assistance on your website, our team is always available at bricksagency.com. Just click get in touch and one of our team members will get back to you and give you a hand. And yeah, that will be pretty much it. I hope you have a good one. Bye bye.